So let's start. First, I want to look at the past and present of Operations Manager. As you can see, it has a long path already behind itself. When you look at MOM 2000 and compare to SCOM 2012 Service Pack 1, there are about 12 years between with many developments, new products or iterations on it. And the most particular move was to System Center Operations Manager 2007, also known as SCOM 2007, and particularly the R2 version. Because the R2 version showed that Microsoft was changing its politics, changing its views, and acknowledging that most IT shops nowadays do not run Microsoft technology only, but that Unix, Linux systems are also there and need proper monitoring as well. And Microsoft always wanted to position Operations Manager as an enterprise monitoring solution, so they had to do something about the Unix and Linux products in order to cover them properly. And first they said, well, we'll leave it up to the market and let them develop, because we're Microsoft and we're not a Unix or Linux house, so we're not going to do it. But then they saw that the third parties and their partners delivered bad solutions. I won't give any names here, but when you've been there, you know what I mean. And those solutions were terrible at their best. So Microsoft decided to make a move and to integrate monitoring of Unix and Linux systems into the R2 product. And that decision has been made by Steve Ballmer himself. And that day when Steve Ballmer gave the green lights for it, pigs did fly at Redmond, because just a year before, Steve Ballmer had said, or at least rumored go, that he said, we will never ever support Unix or Linux systems with Operations Manager, only when pigs do fly at Redmond. And guess what? A year later, those pigs did fly. And from that moment on, the development cycle started to kick in really fast, and also the idea that Microsoft had to gain some more markets with the product and to make it more robust and also to make it more versatile. So what you see with Operations Manager 2012, they integrated AviCode. And AviCode was really something special, but also a very expensive product. It enabled companies alongside Operations Manager to monitor .NET applications down to the bone, from the client perspective, but also from the server perspective, and also to the last piece of code executed on your SQL service. And many companies I engaged with were very interested in the product until I gave them a quote, and it never fell below 100,000 euros. And then they said, well, it's just a bit too much. So the good news was when it was integrated to an Operations Manager 2012 for the same price. So people were very happy about it, but only to see that the product itself, like AviCode, was downsized and was almost a simplified version. So the good news is with Service Pack 1, it has been improved hugely. So it's back to its old level again and even improved much better. But I will tell you more later on about that. First of all, I want to take a step back from Operations Manager and look at System Center 2012 as a whole product. Marketing sells it as a whole product, but there's more to it. There is a whole marketing perspective behind it. And besides the marketing perspective, there's also a perspective of survival for Microsoft, because they see their marketing change. Their markets are really changing, are moving to other solutions. Many companies don't want to own software anymore. They want to use it as a service. So Microsoft has to rethink its strategy and has even to reinvent itself. So that's what I talk about, a clouded future. And what you see is that Microsoft drives the cloud in all shapes and sizes and doesn't fear to create new markets or taking away from other cloud vendors, but they are even cannibalizing their own markets. I've been talking with Microsoft people in the headquarters in the Netherlands, and they told me that they were competing with their own colleagues. Colleagues who were driving the cloud in many shapes and sizes, like Windows Intune or Azure or Office 365. they said we have to compete with them directly. And when they don't, they're out of business. But they already see that their normal pay model changing and going for the cloud. And the whole System Center product is part of that, because Microsoft does not only offer a public cloud solutions in many different shapes and sizes, but also enables companies to create their own personal cloud, also known as a private cloud. And when you look at that whole toolbox, which makes the private cloud, you see about 2 products coming back, which are Windows Server 2012 and System Center 2012. And Windows Server 2012 is a big drive, is a big push in this whole development, because when System Center 2012 became RTM, it didn't have all the power in itself in order to support and fully support Windows Server 2012, which is all new possibilities like Hyper-V version 3, for instance. So Microsoft had to push forward the development of Service Pack 1 to a great extent in order to make it work, like Switch Watch, for instance. So what you see is actually that the Cloud OS, which is branded Windows Server 2012 by the marketing department of Microsoft, that it really resembles System Center 2012. Yes, these are 2 total different products, and yes, System Center 2012 is sold as one product, but it consists out of many components which differ a lot from each other, and yet there are striking resemblances, because when you take a further look, the license model, Windows Server 2012, equals the license model of System Center 2012. Much has changed. When you look at the total SKUs or stock keeping units for System Center and the previous products of it, you had about 200 plus different products, different licenses, which was too hard to keep track of, and many times companies had to pay way too much money or paid too less and found themselves in a situation that they were in breach of contract without really knowing it or wanted to do such a thing. So they went just back to 2 SKUs for Windows Server 2012 and System Center 2012, which are standard and data center. And the only difference is the virtualization density. What you see is that you have the same components, you can use the same functionality. Now with Windows Server 2012, you find the same server rules and the same features in the standard edition and the data center edition. That's a huge step forward compared to the previous versions, Windows Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1, for instance, where you had certain functionality lacking in the standard edition. For instance, failover clustering, only available for an enterprise edition and later on up to data center. Now you find the failover clustering functionality in the standard edition as well. And the only difference is the virtualization density. So when you are running a Hyper-V host and you run Windows Server 2012 on it, and you have a low virtualization density, let's say about 8 virtual machines are running on top of it, many times standard licenses will suffice here. However, when you go over the magic number 8, soon you'll find yourself in a situation that the data center license will cover it all, and a data center license will entitle you to an unlimited amount of VMs running on top of that host, which is also better for failover situations, because when those failover hosts are covered by the same data center license, you are never in breach of contract. You can run an unlimited amount of VMs on top of those hosts. Compared to the situation where you have the standard license in place, you always have to look at the amount of CPUs running on that system, on that host, and compare it to the amount of VMs. You have to divide that number by 2, and for the highest number of, you have to buy yourself licenses. And of course, you know, when you are running 12 VMs and you have only 2 CPUs in place, you have to buy yourself 6 licenses. So when an additional VM is added because of a failover, you are already in breach of contract, and that's way too hard to keep track of. So many times it's better to move to the data center license. And like I already said, both SKUs offer the same set of functionality. when you look at the System Center 2012 license, you see a coverage for all components. So operations manager, service manager, virtual machine manager, app control, orchestrator, data protection manager, or configuration manager. All those products are covered by a single license. And the single license entitles you to two of those two sets. So when you have a license in place, you can decide whatever to implement. And another good thing to know is that you don't need to license the management service themselves anymore. You only license the managed endpoints. So a single license covers two endpoints. When you look at operations manager, for instance, you don't need to license the management servers. You don't need to license the SQL instances, except or only when they are running standard edition SQL Server 2008 R2 or SQL Server 2012, that is. And it's a dedicated SQL Server instance for System Center technology only. And Microsoft goes pretty far with it, because I have implemented complicated operations manager environments which required SQL Server clusters, and a dedicated cluster for the operations database, a dedicated cluster for the data warehouse database, and a single dedicated instance for the reporting instance, and that cannot be clustered. So in total, you're talking about 5 SQL Server instances, and none of them had to be licensed because they were all standard edition, and they were solely used for System Center 2012 technology. And that's quite an achievement. And now many times people ask me the question, yeah, but hello, you're talking about high available clusters. Is that possible with standard edition of SQL? Yes, up to 2 active nodes, you can run an active cluster based on SQL Server standard edition. The main thing is that when you're running Windows Server 2008 R2 as operating system of that cluster, you need at least the Enterprise Edition or Data Center. When you are running System or Windows Server 2012, the Standard Edition will suffice as well, since it has the same functionality as the Data Center Edition. Okay. So, like I already said, no more difference in server roles and features between Windows Server 2012 Standard and Windows Server 2012 Data Center. And this is an important thing, because when you are using Windows Server 2012, think about it so that you are using the proper version and you don't need too many licenses. You can save yourself a whole lot of money. And it's a new mindset, but it will work. And now with System Center 2012 Service Pack 1, SQL Server and Windows Server 2012 are fully supported, except for the Service Manager Self-Service Portal SharePoint web parts, that is. I myself haven't worked that much with Service Manager, so I can't give you all the details here about it, but I know it's the only exception, so I put it in my slide deck so that I give you the correct information. And already for quite a few customers, I have implemented Operations Manager 2012 Service Pack 1 environments running SQL Server 2012, Service Pack 1, and Windows Server 2012. And quite frankly, I think it's the best way to go, because System Center 2012 is moving forward with an ever greater speed. Microsoft is putting System Center 2012 together with the server products and the client products as well. And those products do get an even bigger release cycle. So my personal expectations are that the System Center product will have a huge push forward as well. And that what we're seeing now ain't nothing yet. There's way much more to come. So I'm coming to an MMS, and hopefully you will go as well, so we can meet. But I hope to find new information about that big push forward. So whenever you are in a situation of designing yourself a new System Center 2012 Service Pack 1 component environment, whatever it is, try to use Windows Server 2012. Try to use SQL Server 2012. Of course, it has to match the requirements of your organization and the standards, but when the licenses are there, I think it's a good time to move to that direction. So when you look at Service Pack 1, it didn't only affect Operations Manager 2012, but it touched all other products as well. When you look at Virtual Machine Manager, it really grew up. Already, when you look at Virtual Machine Manager, the previous version, 2008, it was limited to virtual machine management. But when you look at 2012, there was a big push forward to the private cloud. The service models were introduced, how to create your own virtual environment, how to connect to your storage, how to connect to your virtualization host, whether it's C360 Server, VMware vCenter, a connection could be made, and with Virtual Machine Manager you could develop your own services, your own applications, push them forward to your customers, and your customers could push them to the private cloud or public cloud using App Controller. When you look at the Service Pack 1 release of Virtual Machine Manager, you see that the self-service portal of Virtual Machine Manager has been removed and has been totally replaced by App Controller. App Controller is now the self-service interface for the self-service portal for the end users. Running Internet Explorer, they can connect to App Controller and they can control their own parts of private cloud and decide what applications to run in the private cloud or to push them to the public cloud, which is quite an achievement. When you look at all the things which take place at the end of it, it's enormous. And yes, Virtual Machine Manager has become a top-notch complex product. It's not something like Virtual Machine Manager 2008 or 2008 R2 anymore. It has become way much more complex. But when you look at the focus of it, enabling business to run their own applications, to downsize them or to upsize them in whatever flavor they want, and just to roll out SQL services and such things, and web services, front ends, back ends. Yes, it takes a lot of preparation for the IT department, but when everything is in place, you have yourself a very dynamic data center, and finally the push forward has arrived. Microsoft is already talking about the dynamic data center initiative for years, and now in 2012, at the end of 2012 and the beginning of 2013, I finally see it happen. And yet it's still quite a steep learning curve, but it's very challenging, and for many companies it will offer them many good solutions. Well, when you look at Service Manager, it's already targeted at more private cloud usage, applying price sheets, creating chargeback reports, also support for Windows Server 2012, SQL Server, support for Windows 8, improved Operations Manager integration. And for what I've been heard and I've been told that with MMS, a new Exchange connector will be released, totally overhauled, so there's a big change as well. So the development is ever pushing forward. When you look at Orchestrator, the digital duct tape, as I call it, for the data center, when you have heterogeneous products, they don't talk originally with each other, but you need that interchange of information. Orchestrator is the way to go. When you look at Operations Manager 2007, you had those connectors, those data pipelines, but those data pipelines still have many drawbacks. Nowadays, we much more rely on Orchestrator because you're way much more in control and you're capable of programming to the both APIs and to get the best out of both products. And with those data pipelines, those connectors, there was always this chance of corrupting the databases. And with Orchestrator, it has become way much more reliable process to get that grip on that information and interchange of that information. Well, Service Pack for anyone but SCOM Operations 2012 continued. Like I already said, App Controller, it has been pushed forward. It has become the self-service interface based on IIS for the end users of your private cloud and your public cloud, your Azure subscriptions. And as you can see, many more functionalities have been added to it. And since Azure is still a product with a huge life cycle, with a huge development cycle, with a huge R&D budget behind it, which is staggering, which is really amazing compared to the online products or the on-premise products, I think that products like App Controller, Service Manager, Orchestrate, Virtual Machine Manager are about to take off enormously, and it will be developed really, really fast. The push is enormous. Configuration Manager also going to Azure with enabling distribution points based on Azure services, and Data Protection Manager. And I've put Data Protection Manager as the last one because personally I think that the development of Data Protection Manager compared with its competitors is not that good, is not up to spot, is not up to specs. And Data Protection Manager is really leaping behind. And personally I think that when Microsoft has some bugs left over, they put it in DPM. But there's not much to spare, so DPM is just DPM, and they put a little bit functionality into it, but known issues, really known annoying issues like restoring a mailbox on a single level, a single mailbox, that's still not possible, and that's quite bad actually. So DPM, I put it in the slide deck, but I'm not in love with that product at all. Well, Service Pack 1 for Operations Manager 2012. Back to my hometown, back to my comfort zone. And like I already said, application performance management or monitoring, the iteration of Avicode, the integration with Avicode into Operations Manager has got better. When you look at the monitoring, first it had problems with discovering MVC3 and MVC4 applications, which was a big drawback because it really kept the functionality of APM for many of my customers. So it's back, and it's also improved and much more stabilized. And many times I bumped into customers that said, listen, we were interested in Avicode, only to find it scratched, to integrated in Operations Manager and kept by functionality. Why? But when you look at Avicode, it was a separate product. Yes, it had a management pack which could integrate with Operations Manager, but besides the management pack, Avicode was a separate product. And what Microsoft did by integrating in it, I've talked with some of the development teams who were in charge of the whole project. It was an enormous project. It was the scope was enormous, and they had to downsize it in order to meet the deadlines to get Operations Manager 2012 by time on an RTM level. So they had to ditch certain functionality, and they were still developing it, but then they said, we're going to push it forward for Service Pack 1. And even for Service Pack 1, they had to work very, very hard, many weekends, many nights, many evenings in order to get it right. But they did, and it has become an awesome product. The documentation on APM is limited, so in order to get the best out of it, and now we'll make some advertisement for a book, it's Operations Manager 2012 Unleashed. One of the developers, original developers of Avicode, has written the chapter all about application performance monitoring. And it's an awesome chapter. I'm reading it now for a third time, and just getting to grasp with it and to unleash its real power. And personally, I believe for any shop running the .NET applications, which is business critical, APM can deliver you so much information. And the strength of APM is that you don't need to adjust your applications. It just hooks into your application and gets all the information out. And it delivers information on such a level that your developers are really looking at, oh, is that a problem? I can troubleshoot that. I can fix it. And instead of that, you go to the developers, there's no problem with the application. And the application developer looks at you, now your SQL servers are bad, or your web servers aren't, okay? My code is good. My code is the best of the world. So no more discussions on that level. When you look at Windows Server 2012, there's full support for it, for its related services, and also Internet Information Services 8. So it's quite nice. And the support for Unix and Linux has been extended. So new flavors have been added, and also new versions and additions and architectures. So there's still growth on that level as well. And when I take a further look, Global Service Monitoring is introduced. It's an Azure cloud-based service, and it's a benefit for software assurance customers. And it monitors web-based applications and websites from a customer's perspective. What Microsoft says, listen, we've got quite a few data centers all around the globe. Let's elevate the usage of some of those data centers, which are shown here, and let's run them synthetic transactions against those web applications or websites from those customers. So now you have the capability to look at your web applications from an external point of view, combined with APM, which is looking to your application, .NET-based application, from a server side. You can also look from a client perspective from it. You get a 360-degree view of your total application, combined with your component monitoring of SQL, IIS, your server OS, your storage solutions, your virtualization platforms. You have a total view of your environment, and which is quite unique. I must say, Operations Manager isn't the ideal monitoring solutions, but hey, I see many other monitoring solutions, and there are downsides to every monitoring solutions as well. But when you look at the overall approach of it, and you look at the whole development cycle and the level of growth presented in Operations Manager today, it's enormous, and many other products are losing ground on that level. And there are two monitoring types available for global service monitoring, and one of the best is Visual Studio Web Test, and you can create and run multi-step authenticated web tests from Azure-based agents. So that enables you to go into a website or fill a card and look what happens, and then get the data back into your organization. And yes, it takes some programming, but it can be done. So probably you're all saying, well, I want Operations Manager 2012 Service Pack 1. Let's start an upgrade. But there are some things to reckon with. When you're running Operations Manager 2007 R2 from CU level 4 or up to CU 7, there's not a direct upgrade path to Operations Manager 2012 Service Pack 1 available. Instead, you move to Operations Manager 2012 RTM, and from there on you move to 2012 Service Pack 1. But you have to think about two things. Windows Server 2008 R2, Service Pack 1, is the minimum Server OS requirement for Operations Manager 2012. In the meanwhile, it's the maximum Server OS requirement for your SCOM 2007 R2 environment. SQL Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1 is the minimum SQL Server requirement. For Operations Manager 2007 R2, CU level 7, SQL Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 2 is the maximum SQL Server requirement. So when you're running SQL Server of a lower version, or you are running Server OS on a lower version of your Operations Manager server infrastructure rules, like your root management server, your management servers, or your SQL server, it ain't going to work. First you have to fix that, which complicates your whole upgrade process in a magnificent kind of way, because first you have to move from Windows Server 2003 to Windows Server 2008 R2, Service Pack 1, and sometimes you see organizations running 32-bit edition, so that's not an upgrade. You really need to replace those servers. And SQL Server 2005 upgrading to SQL Server 2008 can be quite a challenge as well. So think about it, and preparation is key here. So think about it properly and prepare yourself. On my blog you'll find many postings about those upgrade processes. Read them, and read them over, and try to test them in your test environment when you have it. When you don't have it, try to build it yourself, even when it's single server, but you can learn from it. And it's better to wreck a test environment than your production environment. So suppose you're on Operation Manager R2 CU4 or later, you want to migrate to Windows Server 2012. It's a multi-step process. First you move from Operations Manager 2007 to 2012 RTM. Then you move from 2012 RTM to Service Pack 1, because only from Service Pack 1, SQL Server 2012, Service Pack 1, and Windows Server 2012 are fully supported. And when you're on 2012 Service Pack 1 level, you can move from Windows Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1 to Windows Server 2012. And you can migrate your SQL Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1 or later, which is Service Pack 2, to SQL Server 2012 Service Pack 1. And that multi-step process has been tested by me in one of my testing environments, and I've put those installation and upgrade experiences on my blog as well. So when you visit my blog, you can find that information and use it for your own benefit and of your organization, because it can save you a lot of hassle. But again, preparation is key. And when you think it's way too much effort, looking at the amount of time, the amount of resources, sometimes it's even better to start alongside, to start brand new and shine. And to take the lessons learned from the previous or your current SCOM 2007 environment and to pipe it into Operations Manager 2012 Service Pack 1. But also in a situation like that, don't forget about third-party management packs. Are they upgradable? Can you take the license from 2007 and put it into 2012? Is it possible? Many times when you have your software contracts in place and your support contracts, you will find the companies willing to aid you in that direction. Probably not offering you 100% deal, but many times they are prepared to lower the prices in order to help you along. Just inform your, try it yourself and you'll be surprised. So the final slide actually, Service Pack 1 or not a Service Pack 1, a bit like the famous English writer. Think about Service Pack 1 does not come as a separate package. So it's not just a small package which only contains Service Pack 1 and upgrades your current Operations Manager environment. You get a whole new full installation set. However, there's intelligence in it. It will detect your RTM installation, says, listen, I've detected an RTM environment, do you want me to upgrade it? And it will upgrade it for you. There's one potential pitfall. Be patient, because the first time the upgrade is performed on your first management server, the SQL servers will be touched as well, and those databases will be touched and those databases will be updated. Give it time to end the installation, because when you move too fast and you are already upgrading your management server 2, management server 3, while the first upgrade is in process, the other management servers might fail because they don't find certain entries into the Operations Manager database or try to update the database as well while the first update is already running. So be patient. The best thing to do is to run the upgrade on your first management server, to finish it, to make sure that it has finished successfully, and then to move on to the next or the next management server. Otherwise you might find yourself in trouble. Again, preparation is key. It's not something to be done like, oh, listen, I've got a Wednesday afternoon still empty in my agenda. Let's run an upgrade. Even when you have Operations Manager 2012 in place, plan ahead, think about it, talk about it with your colleagues, prepare yourself. It will make the process way much easier, and the chances of success, well, almost 100%. Also know this, that update rollup package for Service Pack 1 for System Center 2012 is scheduled for April 2013. That rollup package will only contain updates for the relevant components. So perhaps there aren't even updates or hot fixes for Operations Manager 2012 Service Pack 1. I think differently, but that's me. So as you can see, Microsoft is really pushing it forward. And Service Pack 1 isn't the end of the station, it's just the next iteration, and the following iteration is already in progress in Microsoft Redmond. So when having Operations Manager 2012 RTM in place, it's a good idea to move to Service Pack 1. You have already the licenses there. So it's not a licensing issue anymore. You don't have to look at the cost. But again, preparation is key here. And when having Operations Manager 2012 or 2007 R2, CU4 or later in place, more planning and preparations are required. And even ask yourself the question, what's better, an in-place upgrade or an alongside scenario where it's stored all over? And when you have the licenses already in place, why not use them? Operations Manager 2012 has become more expensive compared to Operations Manager 2007. The reason is that when you buy a System Center 2012 license, all components are covered for them. So many times you have to look in and to use a mixed approach. So put in Operations Manager, take Orchestrator for automation of processes and procedures of your organization, and that way you'll see that you lower the prices of those products as well and take more advantage of the functionality of the 2012 System Center product as a whole. This was my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, learned much from it, and now you can ask questions. Feel free.
What we'll do is we'll now throw open the panel for another 5 minutes for everyone to fill in Q&As. Please feel free to locate that at the bottom of the screen. Any question, as Marnix said, is worthwhile. We will attempt to answer all or any of them. The 5 minutes will start now. So Marnix, we're getting a few questions coming in.
All right.
The question I have burning first at the top of the queue is from Peter Nilsson. Do you know, sorry, I'm going to have to translate it. Do you know what the problem is running the SCOM console in other regional settings than English? Is that fixed in SP1, I think is the question.
Yes, unfortunately, no, it hasn't been fixed. And I think the problem is already there since Operation Man 2007, and I haven't seen it solved yet, and I do seriously doubt whether it will ever be fixed, but until now it's not fixed. I'm sorry.
Hopefully that answers your question. The next question I have for you, Marnix, is with 2007 R2, it was better to use SQL Enterprise. Is this still the case with SQL 2012, or can we use the standard edition?
You can still use the standard edition, and even with Operations Manager 2007, you still could use the standard edition quite well. Only in the very big environments, when I'm talking about thousands of servers being monitored, it could be wise to use the Enterprise Edition because it can handle way much more queries. It has a user load before it starts to underperform. So the Enterprise Edition or Standard Edition is more a scaling issue. How many servers are you monitoring? How many reports are you running? And what's the total load on your SQL environment? But Standard Edition will suffice in many occasions. And even in the bigger environments, when you take apart the Operations Manager database service from the data warehouse service, Standard Edition will hold on pretty long before you really have to move on to Enterprise Edition. All right, I see a question as well from Kalisnath Ainchery. I'm sorry when I do not pronounce your name correctly. My apologies. He asked me, do you recommend hosting the Ops Manager and Data Warehouse databases on separate servers? Many times you can decide to put them together, but suppose you run a production environment and you are monitoring quite a lot of servers, and you're also using the reporting functionality to a great extent, it's better to host those databases on separate servers. Then you have a better performance, and the data warehouse performance won't hamper down the performance of your Operations Manager database and your overall monitoring experience. So in cases like that, it's better to separate them. In test environments, you can put them together, but in production environments, sometimes it's better to separate them, yes. Are there any more questions, Justin?
Yes, I have one here. I'm not entirely certain if it's aimed at SCOM or at Civision, so I'll field it with you, Marnix.
Okay.
Is there any fix for the problem of MAC address instead of name presentation in network device performance views?
As far as I know, that issue is still at play.
What we'll do is we'll investigate that from our side.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. I have another question popping in, but for those of you who we can't answer directly here, as Marnix said, we will investigate and we will come back to you with a blog spot, either on the Civision webpage or on Thoughts on Ops Manager blog spot, where we'll endeavor to answer your questions to as best as possible. Obviously, we will keep the names of the questionees quiet for everyone's interest, so you will be anonymous on our blog spots. I have another question in for you, Marnix.
Okay.
The question is, I'll just read it, that's come in. Just need to know the difference between the web transaction monitoring, synthetic monitoring, and web availability.
Can you repeat that question again?
I'm not entirely certain what the question is, but I believe he would like to know the differences between transaction monitoring, synthetic monitoring, and web availability.
Well, transaction monitoring is synthetic monitoring on a certain level. And when you look at availability monitoring, you're looking only at availability of a website and certain functionality. Whereas synthetic transactions allow you to go into a website and perform certain transactions and to get the feedback of those transactions, and not only to look at the availability of those, the system delivering those responses, but also looking at certain web pages and their content, and also the speed of those responses, so you can measure them against a predefined set of parameters, or to check whether their website is still performing within SLA agreement.
Hopefully that does clear up the question that we received in from Mohammed. It looks like we've covered most of the questions. Oh, I've just got one more in. In SCOM, will Microsoft extend the dashboard views and widgets in the future?
I certainly hope so, because that's still a terrain which Microsoft has to get to grips with. The widgets are an improvement compared to Operation Manager 2007, but when you take a look under the hood, Daniel Grandini, a fellow MVP, has blogged about it. It's performed rather poorly. So I certainly hope they will put more effort in it, and from the MVP community we are every time reminding Microsoft about it, and that they must put more effort into it in order to make it better. So yes, I hope so, but no, I'm not sure whether we will see an improvement there, but I certainly hope so.
Unfortunately, I've not been cleared by my marketing team to mention too much on this, but on the words of widgets, for those of you that do follow Civision, I would seriously suggest keeping an eye on our webpage after the MMS. There will be a rather interesting and exciting announcement as to how Civision will also be moving forward using the new abilities within SCOM 2012 and widgets. Marnix, I have another question. As they keep on pouring in, everyone would like to pick your brain. Does Service Pack 1 bring anything more to a full monitoring suite, I think is the reference he's going for, that adds network intelligence?
At this moment, no, it doesn't. Network monitoring is still on a generic level, and I've spoken with some people within Microsoft, and they told me that they are not looking to the situation to make Operations Manager 2012 a purebred network monitoring tool. All they want is to fill in the gaps and to connect the dots with the monitored Windows service and Unix Linux service, so that you can have yourself a mesh and that you see how those servers relate to your network components. But it won't go any further than that. When you're looking for more in-depth network component monitoring, it's wise to contact Yalasoft. They deliver a Xeon I/O Network Manager as an add-on on top of Operations Manager. And that product delivers a very deep and extensive network component monitoring on top of Operations Manager.
We have another question in. Is there a command line available to install the SCOM agent through System Center Config Manager?
Yes, there is, and I think you have to look on the blog of Kevin Holman. Just Google Kevin Holman or Bing, sorry Microsoft. No, just Google it and you'll find his blog, and there must be an entry for all the command lines in order to install agents using Configuration Manager. And also there in the book Operations Manager Unleashed, it's also there. Just a bit of advertisement. Excuse me, Justin.
No problem, Marnix. Shall we field the last question? Why is Microsoft not dividing 2012? I believe he's referring to Management Pack MP and 2007.
Why not? I think there is already some divide taking place, because when you look at certain management packs, they only work in Operations Manager 2012 environments. For instance, the management packs for monitoring Windows Server 2012, or management packs containing some additional dashboards and widgets based on the technology used in 2012. So there is still, the divide is already taking place, but it's a slow movement. Simply because they also have a support statement to live up to for Operations Manager 2007. So they can say just goodbye to it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marnix, for allowing everyone to pick your brain there. We've got some really interesting questions. We will make sure that these are, as I said, mentioned earlier, on your blog and our blog for people to follow up in written. A big thanks, Marnix, for your time and giving us a glimpse into the wonderful white paper that Marnix has put together already on the subject. We have the privilege as Civision of hosting that white paper on our webpage. For those of you who have not read the full expanded version yet, please feel free to go to www.civision.com and have a look underneath the Hot Resources tab. Alternatively, you can also visit Marnix's Thoughts on OpsManager.blogspot for more in-depth discussions, ideas, and Marnix's wisdoms and pearls. And that, I think, leaves me with a final thank you to all the attendees, and again to Marnix, and hopefully we will see you on future webinars.
All right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.